Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve. So, today we're covering investing part three. We're going to dig a little bit more into investment platforms, some of the fees that you need to look out for, the different interfaces, and really a bit more about the day-to-day running of investments and what the platforms can do for you. So it's both Alex and I here again, and we've covered, we think, or we hope, we've covered quite a broad range of topics around investment. So this one's more about platforms, as we said. We're going to give you some scenarios based on fees, and we'll just generally see how the conversation takes us.
Yes, hi again, Alex, and hello everybody. So, yeah, I think as Alex mentioned, we're going to just talk through providers, and it is a real minefield out there, or it can be a real minefield when you're looking at opening your stocks and shares ISA or a SIP. There's claims from all sorts of providers from excellent content and really great user interfaces to you get quite basic platforms, but they can be a little bit cheaper. I think the important thing is to really understand the fees and understand what you're really looking for in an investment platform. So I think defining what you want to be investing in. So we talked, I think, in the last episode about index funds and really basic index funds. If you're not looking to be investing in specific stocks and shares, and you just want to stick to really broad-based index funds, there's some really good providers out there who are really cheap, but your functionality is quite limited. So a good example, and I personally use them myself, is Vanguard. So this is a it's a huge American company. They offer a really good range, probably 30 or 40 different funds that you can invest in, and you sign up with Vanguard for your stocks and shares ISA, or maybe a SIP, or even a general investment account. And what that does is give you access to all of their funds. So you can't this isn't wouldn't be suitable for somebody that wants to start investing in individual shares, thus that you can't access those, or if there are indeed funds which are available from other providers, you only get access to the Vanguard universe. That said, the Vanguard universe is all you really need when investing for the long term and investing in cheap index funds. So, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for Vanguard. I don't know, Alex, do you use them?
So I do, and I only really picked Vanguard because it's quite heavily mentioned in J.L. Collins's book, The Simple Path to Wealth. So that was one of the first investing books that I read, and I figured, like, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. He's done a lot of the research and learning, and perhaps trying other places. So yeah, it is something that I use because I find it quite simple to use. It's not full of it's not technical to use. I think the interface I find is quite good. Again, it's got access to simple index funds. I mean, you can get index funds on any of the platforms, and we're not suggesting you use Vanguard, but you could have a look at it and see. There are many other investment platforms which we'll come on to. Broadly, a lot of them will offer similar things. They'll just look slightly different. So, in my opinion, given investing towards your own financial independence is what we're aiming for here, I would pick the one that you enjoy using the most, and the one that you feel the most comfortable with, because that's the one you're going to stick to longer term. So I've heard quite good things about platforms like Hargreaves Lansdown. Of course, the Vanguard that I've used as well, if you're sticking to index funds. If you want to be trading something like that, which is not particularly something I would suggest, I'm not knowledgeable enough in that field, but something like trading 212 might sit you better. But I think you can sign up to many of them. You can have accounts with all of them and just see how they feel, what they look like, whether there's an app available, and really pick the one that you feel fits you best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm similar with Vanguard. I like the simplicity of it. I've had a experience with a few actually. So you mentioned Hargreaves Lansdown. So that's a really user-friendly interface. you can access, if you wanted to invest in individual companies, in index funds that aren't just from Vanguard or from different providers, you've got that. And also when you start, they have, I'd say, fairly fundamental financial information about any company, so you can do your research on the platform, and that's where you'll start to, I guess, differentiate between some of the more just broad-based index fund providers like Vanguard and something like a Hargreaves Lansdown is the amount of information available on companies. And so if you are keen to kind of look at trading or stock picking, that information is really necessary. And but what comes with that, and you'll see this across all of the platforms, is the more information and the better the user interface, the more expensive the provider. And the impact of fees is something that you really need to be conscious about. So Vanguard tend to be really cheap. So there'll be two types of fees that you'll come across when you're looking at investments. So one is the platform fee, or like the provider fee. So that would be how much it would be Hargreaves Lansdown charge you, or how much Vanguard charge you. And then you'll also have the fee for the fund itself. So these funds are managed by a team, or they're managed by a corporation who have overheads, and you'll usually get charged for global broad-based index funds. It's usually anywhere from 0.1% to maybe 0.2, 0.3%. But if you start to look at more exotic funds, say if you're in the emerging markets or certainly actively managed funds, it's not uncommon to be paying 1% plus just for the fund fee. So you've got to be really conscious of the fees when it comes to selecting your provider.
For sure. I think fees are a big part of it. I mean, I wouldn't get too hung up on the fee structure, but make sure you understand it, and you make sure you understand the total amount of fees. Like Alex has just mentioned a couple of them. So there can be like ongoing management charges for these funds. There can be additional advisor fees if it's an actively managed fund rather than a passive fund. So essentially, the more work the investment company has to put in with their platform, with offering guidance from an advisor, perhaps, the more that's going to cost you. We, I think, I can only speak for myself, and I wonder if Alex would agree, but we would advocate the cheapest fees would be best, because they take or can take a good chunk of your wealth away from you over time. And I know Alex, being the accountant, has done a little bit of maths that we'll cover in a minute, just to highlight how damaging a 1% fee can be to a portfolio. It's your hard earned money, and we want to help you keep as much of that as possible. Another thing that I've recently done after reading a blog post from Lazy Fi Guy, who I've interviewed for this show as well, he suggests paying the fees for your platform via direct debit as if it's a bill, instead of them selling some of your shares. So even though it's going to be a tiny, tiny amount that they would sell, it's still a little bit extra that you could have compounding for you. So I do that myself. I pay my Vanguard bill whenever it's due. I think it's 3 monthly or something. It's not expensive at all for the amount of growth that I've had, but I always pay that direct debit, so they don't have to sell any of my portfolio. I can leave it well alone, and it can compound for the longest time possible.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because it's something that often catches people out is the fees and when they're paid. So like paying by direct debit is a good idea, or alternatively you can just leave some cash in your account, so they will use that cash rather than selling anything. But I'm similar. I also pay mine by direct debit, just to leave my investments untouched, and to not interfere with the compounding of them. But yeah, you mentioned obviously about the effect of interest. Oh, sorry, the effect of fees on returns and what that could mean. So I have been scribbling away, and I've done a few calculations, and I'll just talk through them now. But they're quite astounding when you think. essentially the only thing we're looking at here is a difference in the fee, and it should be said, but maybe one immediate rebuttal as well. If you pay higher fees, you get better investment returns from active managers. But in, I think, over like 95% of cases, active managers do not outperform the index. So it's that I think is a rebuttal that has been disproven, quite a few times.
Yeah, I think that's something it's spoken about an awful lot. That if you have someone actively managing the money, they're going to get a better return for you. And Andy Hart's done a really, really good episode on outperformance in the stock market, and it can be done. People do it, and they get labelled as a great fund manager, and loads of money gets flowed into their kind of hands through their portfolios. But repetition of outperformance is really, really difficult. I mean, you only need to look at the stories of Neil Woodford, um, or Kathy Wood, I think, as well. Something like that is these people have outperformed in a big way, but they haven't been able to sustain that outperformance. Whereas we would argue and advocate that even tracking the market, the benchmarks for that, if you can consistently do that over 10 years, that will put you in the top 1% of all investment returns. And if you can continue to do that for 20, 30, 40 years, even 50 if you start really early, you're going to outperform, I would argue, 99.9% of the fund managers out there. There are very, very, very few of them that can do it. The people that do it get highlighted, lauded in papers and things. And now the world hears about them and they think it's easy. It's really not. So it's not something I've tried because I don't believe I'm clever enough to do that, and I don't have the time to put in either, but it's something that I think you need to be aware of. So try not to make the same mistakes that have happened already. So, Alex, you've done some maths. So I think just going through those calculations you've done, I mean, I know that fees matter, but I was quite shocked by the difference in total wealth that you can accumulate if you take into account some of the fees. So over to you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So, yeah, I've just done a couple of different scenarios. So, all of these are assuming a kind of 6% return over a gross return over a 20-year period. So, and then we're just going to take off the impact of fees. So, in the first scenario, you're investing £250 a month, and so if you're earning 6%, and say you go for a cheap index fund provider, and your fees are 0.5% per year, so that means your net return will be 5.5%. So after that 20 years, you'll have just under £105,000 in your nest egg, which is a lovely amount of money. But if you were to do exactly the same, but the fund provider, so you're still earning your kind of 6% gross return, if you're then going to be getting a 1.5% fee, so that's just 1% more um, than in the kind of really cheap version, you will be, after the 20 years, you'll have just over 94,000, so about £10,500 less over that 20-year period in your nest egg. And then if we say instead of 250 a month, you're going to be putting away 500 a month, the difference it ends up bigger. So you'd end up with, if you just had your 0.5% fee, so you'd be earning 5.5% net return, you'd end up with just over £209,000 after 20 years. But then if you went with the more expensive option and your fees were 1.5% and still got that 6% gross return, you'd end up with just over 188,000. So it's almost like 21,000 pounds less, and doubling that. So if you're paying £1,000 a month, which if you've got a workplace pension and if you've got you're investing on the side to an ISA, after 20 years, if you're earning 6% return but 0.5% of fees, you'd end up with just over £418,000. And then, quite astonishingly, you'd end up 42,000 pounds poorer if you went for a more expensive fund. So if you were to be still earning that 6% return but paying 1.5% of your fee, yeah, you'd end up with just over £376,000. So about a £42,000 hit there just for the impact of fees. So it may not sound like a lot, a 1% difference, but over time, and especially if you're, investing a sizable amount, that it really starts to make meaningful dents in your wealth. And also that means, you've got, obviously less money to live off, less freedom, less options.
Those figures are crazy. Like I know we talked a little bit before we hit record about them, but imagine having £42,000 less when you finally get to your fire date or your retirement date. I would much rather have that in my pocket, and I'd rather anyone listening to this has keeps more of their own money. They worked hard enough for it. So I think you articulated that really well, and I hope people really think and take action on those points. But I think it's also worth thinking about you've mentioned the percentages there as fees, but at the same time, we can apply this thinking to something like pension contributions or your own investments per month. So if you can invest within your pension, say, your employer will put in say 5% standard, but they'll actually match up to 8, you're gaining an extra 3% from them. So take all of that extra money that you can, and we'll do a bit more of a deep dive on pensions as well, because the more money you can put in per month, the more you're going to make and the more you're going to keep on the other side of it too. So really get to grips with it, ask HR the right questions, look online at the portfolios you hold, and really ask the questions of the people that know. If you don't know the answer, find out what fees you're paying and see if you can pay less for that kind of service. So I've recently swapped one of my like an older workplace pension that was with an investment platform, and I've swapped that to a Vanguard SIP, which is a self-invested private pension SIPP, and as a result, that saved me 0.45% on management fees or fees of that. And I haven't done the maths to calculate how much that will save me, but if it's anything like what Alex has just discussed, it's going to be a really useful couple of hours of my time. So I think the key note here is just to be aware of fees. They're not the be all and end all. Yes, you have to pay some fees to have access to the funds and things, etc. That is normal. It's the price of admission. If you choose the index funds or the funds you pick well, they will more than pay for any fees that you pay, and you'll end up being far richer if you have enough time left on your side. So, with the the different investment platforms, Alex, are we thinking then that generally most of them do a similar job, but we need to keep an eye on the fee structure for it? Is there anything else you think we need to think about? I know we've talked before about how much you check your portfolios, and humans are the biggest wealth destroyers because we tinker with stuff. We think we can improve it when actually the inverse is true with investing. If we just forgot our logging details and never checked it for 40 years, we'd end up being a damn sight richer than if we think about the markets and we make changes based on news cycles and stuff. So, is there any other points you have around the platforms, or should we move on?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, I think for me, it's defining really what you want to be accessing, or what investments do you want access to. I think, most people, a really basic index fund is all they need. And the important thing is contributing regularly to that and trying to increase your contributions as much as possible, and then just leave it alone. Exactly as you said, I think there's a real tendency to, if you have a platform that certainly tries to encourage a bit of trading, so you can see these, especially in some of the more like fintech type platforms, with the notifications every few minutes on how your portfolio is doing, and it it can send you into like doing silly things with your money. So I think really for most people, basic indexes on a simple platform, don't check it too much and focus on just trying to fill it. Like fill your stocks and shares ISA, do as much as you can each month to invest as much as you can. That's the thing that's going to make the difference. I think you can get so for me, I know I've gone through quite a few of the different platforms, and yeah, I still think something like a Vanguard really suits everybody everybody's needs on a really simple basis. So, but yeah, I wouldn't. It's that you mentioned a good point of not checking it too often and get doing silly things, and maybe just look to give yourself one day a month to look at it or something, and try and be disciplined. Something without an app is helpful. If you find yourself really inclined to be checking all the time and feeling worried and getting nervous, so that would be my kind of final thoughts on platforms. But yeah, it's just choosing something that fits right with you.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about what you say about putting barriers in the way of making silly mistakes. So, as we've discussed previously, and we'll dig a bit more as well in other episodes, but money's a real emotional topic. So, you can do a lot with money if you have it and you manage it well. You're a good custodian of the money through your lifetime, because it can change your your life. It can change like generational wealth can change the life of your subsequent family. Some of haven't even been born or even thought about yet. And I think one of the important things is all of the platforms will offer automation. So automate these transfers. Don't spend the time logging in and manually transferring money every month. So I have an automatic direct debit the day after I get paid, and I've slowly nudged that up over time. I started with £100 for a couple of months just to make sure it was right, going in the right place, and then I've slowly, as I've earned more and as I've simplified my financial life, I've added more and more to that, to the point where it's ever so slightly uncomfortable, but it's not catastrophic. And it's done me really, really well. I try and compete with my past year's self to put more in my stocks and shares ISA than I did last year. Even if it's by 10 quid, it's still better than going backwards or taking any money out. And really, I used to check it a lot. And by a lot, I mean multiple times a day, and actually, it was to my detriment because I felt great when it went up and I felt bad when it went down. So, the concept here is loss aversion. So, we feel losses twice as strongly as we do wins. So, if I was to give Alex £100, he would feel somewhat happy about it for maybe 5 minutes. But if I were to take £100 from him, he'd feel a lot worse because he's earned it, he's put the effort in already. It's not just a free gift. So the the strategy I think that I've used here is I've physically written down a financial plan, and I've written to myself and I dated it in 2019 that I will invest some money every month. No figures at this point, but I will invest some money every month so I can have build the life that I would like. And for me, the reasoning behind that and my logic behind it is to be able to give my future children enough money to have driving lessons, to go to a university of their choice if they wish, to be able to have a deposit for a house without slogging the guts out working 3 jobs. And my idea there is I will double whatever deposit they come up with for a house up to a limit. Maybe one of them will become a YouTuber and bring in, like, I don't know, 200k and ask me for double that, which I'll have to say no. But the idea of that is that's why I'm doing it. So I don't view this money that I have as mine. It's for a future version of me to give away. Yes, I'll keep it within the family. Might do something philanthropic if I have more than I could ever spend. But that's the reason I can distance myself from it. So I don't panic whether it goes up. Don't panic whether it goes down. I just leave it in and trust the process for the long haul. And actually, it's better if it goes down early in your investing career, because all the money you put in buys you more units. It buys you more shares of those companies in the index, which over time will increase in value. So drops in the stock market are really the time to buy. We're not saying time the market, just flow money in every month if you can, and try and increase that over time. So if you get a 5% pay rise, I would say use 2.5% of it to treat yourself to something. You worked hard for it, and put the other 2.5 into your investing account. And you can do the maths. Use a compound interest calculator to work out what an extra £25, an extra 50, an extra £200 a month would do to your long-term wealth. And I think, as I was surprised at the fees structure that Alex has discussed, I think you'll be surprised at the wealth building power of those monthly contributions.
Yeah, some really good points there. I think always remembering why you're doing it is, why you're investing and why you're saving is really important. And for me, my motivation is to have complete control of my time. I want to be in a position where I don't have to be working, where I can do what I want when I want with who I like is for me is the ultimate the ultimate freedom.
I was just thinking of the word freedom as you were speaking, and I know for anyone who's not heard of a chap called Ramit Sethi or Sethi, he he wrote the book I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and he also runs a podcast with that name. He always says that people always give that kind of answer that they want to be able to do whatever they want with their time, but they don't know what that is. So I think it's worth thinking about the life you want to build, the life you want to curate, and have something to motivate you into, but have something to do once you reach it. Because I've got full confidence that anybody listening to this with enough nous to make these decisions I mean, even the fact you're listening to a finance podcast to begin with shows you're interested, shows you're motivated to change your financial life. So have something that you want to actively do. I mean, I don't have a picture of my ideal life apart from sitting somewhere warm drinking espressos most of the day. But I don't know, Alex, have you thought much about what that will look like for you, or is it just to have at the moment, is it just to have that choice over what to do with your time?
Yeah, I mean, it's not planned to within an inch of its life, but in terms of there's several options which I want to do. So whether that's, you know, I think traveling for half the year, and working the other half, building up maybe a bit of a small consulting business. We also talk about, me and my partner, looking at potentially investing in a campsite. We love camping and combining some of the amazing experiences we've had traveling and the fact we love camping and the outdoors and nature into like building up and developing something. So there's a lot there, but I don't think I will ever. The plan for me is never to call it quits and then just sit in front of Netflix for the next 30 years. It's much more about exploring different, whether that's small business opportunities, traveling and seeing the world, maybe just dip in and out of the workforce. So there's lots of ideas. Um, there isn't a once I'm done, this is going to happen. It just helps me keep motivated during this period of the accumulation phase. So that's kind of where I'm at, and the same with my partner. We're just it the carrot is the time freedom, and it's the control of time that is for me more than anything, and then we will find hundreds of ways to fill that time. I think you often hear people who, I talk to them, if you know, at parties or at weddings or whatever, and you get chatting to people and you talk about financial freedom, of being financially independent and doing what you want when you want. And often the response I get is, God, won't you be bored? Like, what are you going to be doing all the time? And I think I'd rather be bored and not have to work than be chained to a desk for the next 35 years. So it's, yeah, but for me, it's, lots of ideas in, hopefully within a decade that becomes a reality, and I'll worry about the specifics then. But for now, it's that the feeling of getting up on a Monday morning and not having to do anything or doing what I want, which is keeping me motivated. Yeah. So that's kind of what keeps me and my partner going.
When you were talking, I have this mental image in my head of, for some reason, there's a mountain in it, and at the bottom of the mountain, there's just this lovely looking campsite full of different coloured tents, maybe a little caravan or motorhome or two. And some people have like barbecues, some people have campfires, some people are playing little instruments and stuff, and it's just very peaceful. And I think we're all on the path towards financial independence. I think for very similar reasons to what you and I have just discussed. And I think, mostly the time freedom thing. I mean, time is our most valuable asset. It's something that no amount of money can buy you more of. And once we've used our time, that's it. We can't get it back. So I think our motivations, and I speak for Alex, me, all of us collectively listening along, that is a real push in the right direction, and it's hopefully turning something into beauty just by knowing a little bit more and having a bit of a plan along the way, which of course can change with life, but having part of a plan is better than having no plan and going around in circles. So I think we should leave it there. I will happily meet you on a campsite. I'll bring the coffee, and I won't expect a discount on my ticket. I'll pay whatever price your campsite demands. And I think with that, I think we'll close this one, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening. None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.